Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Tangled State storyline as we take a look at Web Warriors number 10. Now, last time on Web Warriors! Put simply, the web of life in Destiny was getting a bit hectic. With all the damage it had sustained from previous stories, the strands in the web were starting to become intertangled with one another. While this did cause problems across the multiverse, they ranged from major to minor. The most minor examples being that, because of how things were tangled, certain strands in the web would get lost within the clumps, which would result in the worlds corresponding to those strands being inaccessible. While the major examples being that as a result of the worlds essentially kind of intermingling with one another, it would result in their corresponding realities essentially crossing over into one another. With one example being that Spider-Punk's world crossing over with a 2099 version of Spider-Ham's world and the Marvel Megamorphs universe, which, to remind you, is a universe where superheroes and supervillains ride around in giant robots that are there to market toys. In an attempt to fix the problem, Octavia Otto wound up trying to manually untangle the web, which did end up getting her and Karn access back to Earth 803, where Billy Braddock and Mayday Parker are. But unfortunately, it also caused a reality quake that not only cut them off from the rest of the team, but caused the Web Warriors to get scrambled across the multiverse, with Anya Corazon, Lady Spider, Spider-Punk, and the Megamorph Spider-Man being stuck in Spider-Punk's world. Spider-Gwen, Spider-Ham 2099, and Megamorph Doc Ock being sent to the regular Spider-Ham's universe, and Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Man India, and Spider-Ham to get sent to the Marvel Noir universe, which, upon arriving in that universe, they soon discover that Spider-Man Noir was dealing with on his home front, with the whole modern technology being introduced thing, and they begin realizing that whatever's going on, that it's somehow tied to Osborn, as they see a billboard for Oscorp. While Spider-Man Noir does kind of get into a slight tussle with Pavitra over not telling the team about this, they do decide that the best course of action is to try and investigate what's going on in Spider-Man Noir's universe, and they soon discover that the Osborn that's in charge of all this is Harry Osborn, who is actually not from the Marvel Noir universe. In fact, this is actually a Harry Osborn from another universe, a universe where he's Spider-Man, and basically the whole reason why he and his entire corporation is in the Marvel Noir universe at all is because this is another side effect of these strands in the web becoming tangled up with one another. And as a result, he's been trying to find a way to fix all this, and after Spider-Man Noir, after the Spideys end up breaking down his door wanting answers, he thinks it's the perfect opportunity to study this problem and figure out what the heck's going on. Personally, I think they should be a little suspect because they saw his workers hauling stuff, and apparently as they were hauling stuff, one of them shot a guy. So maybe not trust the guy, but whatever. That's not important. What is important is that back on Earth 803. Well, the Electros got free from their cage, and sadly the only spider people on that world are Mayday and Billy against the whole army of Electros, who, yes, may be hungry and malnourished, but they're still electric psychopaths, and eventually sheer numbers are going to overpower the Spideys. So as a result, since the Web Warriors are now inaccessible and can't get back to Loom World, Karn and Octavia decide that if they can't get the rest of the team, they'll settle for other people, because while the web may be tangled up, they can still access a lot of worlds in it. And so Octavia begins building another army of spider people in order to go help Billy and Mayday fend off the Electros, with one of those Spideys being Spider-Man again, which is where this issue picks up. Now, like I said, while last issue was kind of a breather issue, this one is definitely where things start picking up again, and yes, it does get kind of convoluted and confusing, so bear with me if I have trouble summarizing the plot for the story, so yeah, again, apologies. But the story actually begins on another universe where supposedly we see stylized, I guess, armored versions of Spider-Man and Spider-Woman, or Spider-Gwen. It basically looks like an alternate version of Spider-Gwen, but they're calling her Spider-Woman, so whatever. Fighting against the Green Goblin. And while it looks like a standard Spidey battle with the Green Goblin, ultimately, they get interrupted as a portal opens and Octavia Otto comes through with the army of spider people, complaining that this is still the wrong Earth, because Karn is because of all the tangles in the web, Karn is having trouble opening gateways for Octavia and co. to get to Earth 803. Although Octavia thinks that, maybe this wasn't a total loss, because, hey, I see spider people over there, and she gives them the whole shtick about how they're jumping from the multiverse, going on a rescue mission and so forth, but as she asks if they want to join them, Spider-Man says, well, what are you talking? Well, the thing is, what do you mean? Spider-Man's not real. We're just actors. Yeah, it turns out in this universe, Spider-Man is just a regular fictional character, like in our universe. And the scene that we saw was just the actors playing Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, and the Green Goblin just acting out a scene. Of course, Octavia apologizes for the inconvenience and for possibly shattering their perceptions of reality, though she still offers the actors playing Spider-Man and Spider-Woman a chance to come along since, they're still wearing the costume, maybe they could help. And while the Spider-Man actors that turns it down and says, no, it's fine, it's like, no, but we're just actors, the lady playing Spider-Woman is just all excited, like, hey, I took 3 martial arts classes for my last role, so they just welcome her on the team and they all just go off with all the film crew just going like, you got that, right? But, yeah, at this point, things just get hectic across the story. Mayday and Billy are still dealing with all the Electros on Earth 803, and while a good chunk of them are easy to deal with or passed out due to their hunger, it's still a matter of numbers. The Electros have vastly outnumbered Mayday and Billy 100-1, and on top of that, they're still be connected to the Battery, who is very much not happy with him and his Electro army being trapped in a Faraday cage, and thus not only wants to destroy these 2 Spideys as recompense, but also the entirety of the city. So, the clock is ticking, and unfortunately, Octavia and her Spider Army are still just bopping between universes and losing their way, and admittedly, it does kind of get amusing seeing them jump from universe to universe, but eventually, things do start going their way, because Karn is able to get a lock on to the signals of their watches, and sure enough, he does manage to bring Spider-Gwen to Spider. He manages to bring Octavia Otto to Spider-Ham's universe, where Spider-Gwen is just kind of sitting back and relaxing after the Scavengers, which I realized a while ago is a play on Scavengers. I'm glad I kind of missed that, but also I'm kind of angry at myself for having missed it for so long. Anyway, the Scavengers have actually beaten Megamorph Doc Ock, and everything's all well. And well, the Spider Army grabs Gwen and takes her off. No word on Spider-Ham 2099. I think from this point on, he's not even in the story anymore. So he had a purpose somewhere. But eventually, yes, Karn does manage to open a portal to Earth 803 and so Octavia and the Spider Army come in, and it leads to just an all-out brawl between the Electros and the Spider Army, which, again, I expected to not really get into upon rereading these comics for the vlogs, but it's still awesome. It's still awesome. You got an army of Spider-Men and women against an army of Electros. That's fucking cool. You can't tell me that it isn't. But in the meantime, in other parts of the multiverse, we see that, well, things are starting to get a bit more hectic. Going back to the Marvel Noir universe. Basically, Spider-Man India and Spider-Man Noir have been trading notes with Harry about how the multiverse is structured, about how the Web of Life and Destiny is the foundation for the multiverse, and how the Web Warriors jump from universe to universe via their wristwatches to jump from the strands. Although they do warn Harry that the strands of the web are getting tangled up with one another and causing this to cross over, most likely resulting in Harry getting trapped on the Marvel Noir universe. Of course, he kind of wants to know. Of course, he is curious about what the heck happened, and so likewise, when they do explain how they've been jumping with the wristwatches, Harry examines the watches and actually is able to figure out why things have been going hectic with the multiverse. It's the Web Warriors' fault, which, admittedly, when Spider-Man Noir hears this, he does kind of go, see, I knew it. But yeah, it turns out with the way the Web Warriors have been jumping from universe to universe so hectically, well, it's been causing the strands of the web to get tangled up with one another. Of course, Spider-Man India asks, well, how come this is happening now and not like before? Because the Inheritors were utilizing the Web of Life and Destiny for millennia, and they never had to deal with problems with it. But the thing is, they were not using the wristwatches. They don't say this directly in the comic, but you can pretty much infer it. Basically, the technology that the Web Warriors have been using is just essentially a crude technology, and likewise, the watches. The watches aren't the web. The watches tap into the web to open portals for the Web Warriors to jump from universe to universe. But ultimately, that's all they're doing. They're just tapping into the web. Likewise, with the Inheritors, they utilize the web directly through the Master Weaver. They pretty much just told the Master Weaver, "Hey, open a portal to this world," and he was able to weave a pathway to that world through the Web of Life and Destiny, because we saw that the Web of Life and Destiny can affect the greater multiverse, because it is a foundation of the multiverse. Going back to Superior Spider-Man number 33, during the flashback with Karn, we saw that the original Master Weaver was able to undo entire parts of his home by just snipping a few pieces of the web here and there, as well as to destroy an entire person. So likewise, it makes sense that he would know how to expertly craft the web in such a way that he could just open a portal to other worlds, and open a portal to other worlds. So of course, for them, it would be of course, the Master Weaver, it would be methodical, meticulous, and actually be thought out. Whereas likewise with these watches, as Harry describes it, it's like trying to open a door with dynamite. These watches tap into the web and essentially just punch a hole from one world to the other. And as a result, as a result of him getting tangled up, it doesn't. As a result of using the crew technology, the strands essentially just become intermingled. The more they connect with one another, and thus it causes more problems in other places because it's a big web, and it's like complete and utter collapse. It's the Web Warriors' fault for this. So does that mean that Harry's going to help them figure out a problem or figure out a solution for this? How to undo the mistake they've made? Actually, no. Because you see, my dear viewers, well, much like with the Spider-Verse tie-ins to Secret Wars, you shouldn't trust a man named Osborn when his company is clearly utilizing criminal affairs. Because again, we saw a guy get shot outside his building while they were hauling out equipment. And it turns out that Harry is... it turns out Harry was not as good a guy as he wants. As he says, "Now that I understand this analogy, do you realize what kind of weapon I can make with it?" At which point Pavitcher's like, "You wouldn't though, right?" And then Spider-Man Noir shouts out, "Pavitcher, my spider sense," and Harry with a sinister smile ends up trying to gas both Pavitcher and Noir. But while Pavitcher gets a good snoot of the gas and gets knocked out, Noir manages to dodge it and pulls out a rifle and starts shooting at Harry. And sure enough, some of the bullets end up grazing Harry's face. And kind of a nice little detail that I like, the face he has is a skin suit. And I like this detail because it's kind of a callback to the Noir version of the Goblin. As I mentioned, because in the Noir universe, the Goblin wasn't just Norman Osborn's criminal alias. It turns out that he got it because he was in the Freak Show. His skin was actually green and scaly, and the human face that you saw throughout most of the miniseries in Spider-Man Noir was actually a skin suit, and that wound up getting ripped at the end of the original 4-issue miniseries. So I kind of like that it gets a callback with Harry here, underneath the skin is a goblin, and we see he's a goblin, and sure enough, once that happens, Harry ends up running up to Noir and punches him out, and then gasses him too. And that's at this point that Harry actually begins expositing about his backstory. It turns out he was not lying. He is indeed the Spider-Man of his world, but he's also the Green Goblin. In his universe, Norman Osborn became the Green Goblin before a Spider-Man could exist, and as a result, he utilized these powers to essentially take over New York, building an entire empire for himself, and thus when he had Harry inherited all those powers. And then he got bitten by the radioactive spider and became his world's spider person. And as a result, Harry became even more powerful than his dad and actually rose up against him and overthrew him, taking Norman's empire for himself. And as a result, that world didn't get a Spider-Man, it got a Spider Goblin. And yeah, he's just as ruthless as any other goblin in the multiverse. And likewise, now that he knows exactly what's been causing the multiverse to go haywire, he's ready to take full advantage of it and pretty much find his own solution. Although after he takes out Spider-Man India and Spider-Man Noir, he wonders where Spider-Ham went because he could use a good order of bacon. And thankfully, it turns out that when the reveal happened, Spider-Ham had gone out to get a burrito. So when he comes back, he sees what's going on and decides to just wait outside. So, at least he's safe. So there's one Spidey that's not getting their ass handed to them. In the meantime, though, back on Spider-Punk's world, well, the team is still the Spideys there are not having much luck. While they were originally planning to utilize Megamorph Spidey's giant robot to try and gather parts in order to build a dimensional communicator. Well, it's a giant robot created to advertise toys. Every single bit of it is childish. It makes no sense and really just does not line up with traditional sciences to the point where Lady Spider is like, this thing makes no sense. It was like it was designed by children. So it looks like at first that utilizing Megamorph Spidey as a baseline for communicating with the other Spideys is a bust. However, as such, the team begins tries thinking of other solutions, and it basically goes back to their watches because, well, their watches are not broken. They're just out of sync. They still function, they still work, but it's just that they're out of sync, and thus the Spideys here can't communicate with any of the other worlds, and likewise can't leave Earth 138. And so basically what they need to do is just find a way to sync it back up, to resonate with the web of life again and with the other communicators, but they don't know how to do that. That is until Hobie gives them a solution, because in his infinite boredom, he begins tapping his drumsticks on the leg of Megamorph Spidey's suit, which actually starts annoying the Megamorph Spidey, because, well, there is a guy in the robot, and you can hear the tapping resonating throughout the entire suit, and it's giving him a headache. So he tells Hobie to knock it off, but Hobie just says this is his rage against the machine, and pretty much just basically this giant robot is just like an exemplification of commercialism gone awry. However, as Lady Riley realizes what's going on, she has an idea. If they can hook something up to the device, if they can hook up their watches to Megamorph Spidey's suit, because when he was talking about the feature of the suit, he mentioned he had a power source that was pretty much had unlimited power. And if they resonate it to the right frequency, it could allow them to tap back into the web and sync back up with all the other communicators, and thus allow the Spideys access back to the multiverse. As a result, they end up doing just that, hooking up their watches directly to Hobie's electric guitar, and have that get hooked directly into Megamorph Spidey's suit, and thus after giving the okay, so Hobie Brown strums on his guitar, and sure enough, the surge of power combined with Megamorph Spidey's power source manages to get the watches back up and running, sync them back up with the other watches, and allows this group of Spideys to end up to finally leave Earth 138 and head back into the multiverse, specifically heading back to Earth. Hold on one second. Sorry, I briefly forgot the Lady Spider's world. But yeah, it allows the team of Spideys to go back to Earth 803 just as the Electro War is going off. And while at first Anya's all like, yes, hey guys, we're here, we brought an indestructible giant robot. The Electros look at that, and the Battery's first response is, we gotta have that robot. At which point, Anya starts kind of cursing herself over this, and the Electros immediately zero in on Megamorph Spidey and start trying to fry them, and immediately trying to fry the suit, which does resonate throughout it and get directly to the Spider-Man in the control panel. Now, this does not kill him because, spoilers, Megamorph Spider-Man does come back in another Spider-Verse storyline. But to try and save himself and try and keep himself from being fried in the suit, Megamorph Spider-Man essentially does have to abandon ship, as with the power he has, he manages to grab at his head and rip it off the suit, which is where I'm guessing the control is for the entire thing. As such, it does save him from being fried, but it also leaves the suit vacant. And the Battery is very much willing to jump in, as the Battery ends up hooking himself directly into what's left of the Megamorph robot and takes complete control of it, ending the issue with him getting ready for battle and talking about, so what were you saying about an indestructible robot? Okay. Yeah, this is where things start getting bonkers. Basically, everything is now happening at once here. There is so much shit to keep track of this issue that it's kind of becoming insane. And now, going back to, Web Warriors number 7, like I said, I complimented that book, or that issue, because of how crazy things could get. But in that story, it was crazy but not confusing. It was insane because of the setup that we had. We had Hobie Brown, the Spider-Punk, this anti-establishment anarchist Spider-Man, crossing over with cartoon anthropomorphized animals who wanted to take over the world and who operated completely on cartoon physics. That was silly, insane, and stupid, but it was fun, especially when the issue ended with the giant robots entering the scene because that was crazy, but it was like, okay, I kind of want to see where this goes. You were pulled in to the insanity, and it made you want to know where things were going from there. But this one is where things just get so freaking crazy. It's all like there's too much happening all at once. There is, I'm not going to say that there are bad things that happen in the story. This is all bad things because there is still some legitimately good parts to the story. But the rest of the story feels very cluttered. Like, case in point, throughout the story, there's the constant threat of the Electroverse army just overwhelming Mayday and Billy, and they constantly remind you of that the two Spideys are dealing with all this gaggle of supervillains all the time. And likewise, when you see Octavia just jumping from universe to universe, it can get confusing, especially when you have to keep track of where they're going and how things are. Because eventually just starts getting a little tiring because of how many worlds they're just jumping through. At least in Spider-Verse, when they were jumping from universe to universe, there was a home base, a place they could go back to. And that was the case for all the Spider Armies. For the regular Spider Army, they were situated on Earth 13. So they would jump to a universe, deal with what was going on there, recruit the Spidey and say, "Hey, come with us." And they went back to Earth 13 where they could rest up and they could catch their breath. And then likewise, the Superior Spider Army were stationed in 2099. So yeah, it was a similar case. Jump to another universe, do what you need to do, then come back. So it really didn't feel like things were jumping around. It was essentially go here, go back, go here, go back. And then likewise when they had to change locations, like when Earth 13, like when the Cosmic Spider-Man of Earth 13 was killed, and the Spider Army had to move to Earth 3145. It still didn't feel too confusing because things weren't just so hectic. And if they were hectic, it was still just situated in one place. And as a result, it still made the story easy to follow. But here, it starts getting really jumpy and confusing, having so many things happening across all these different universes. You got the team of Spideys who are trying to reignite their watches on Spider-Punk's world. You've got the Electroverse screwing things up on Earth 803 as they finally break free, and Mayday and Billy are on the car, have to essentially survive long enough for the reinforcements to arrive, which, again, I will give credit. That was still awesome to see all those Spideys fighting off against all those Electros. There's no way in hell I can say that that's bad. But ultimately, what makes things so very confusing, but ultimately, after that, things just go... But ultimately, with all those threats stacked up on top of each other, it feels confusing. It feels all over the place. And then you add on the stuff with the Spider Goblin. At that point, it's like you took what was supposed to be its own threat altogether and just had to superimpose it into this one. Because I'm just going to say this right now. The Electroverse feels like the bigger threat compared to the Spider Goblin. And that's not to say that the Spider Goblin isn't a threat. He is a fusion of Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, utilizing the powers of both, having the viciousness of the Green Goblin with all the abilities and agility of Spider-Man, and combine that all the technical know-how of being an Osborn. It just makes it all, and of course that can make him a viable threat. The problem there is that feels like a completely separate issue that should have been explored in its own way, which kind of feeds into what I feel is the problem with the end of Web Warriors. It feels cluttered. Like, so many things were happening at the same time. And I suspect part of the reason for that is because the series was only made 11 issues. I suspect that there were plans to have more issues to further develop storylines, but when the book got cut off when the book got capped off at 11, essentially the writer and the creative team had to go, well, fuck, we gotta wrap this up as best as we can. So they had to just throw everything together. They had to wrap up the storyline with Mayday and Billy and the Electros. They had to wrap up the storyline with Spider-Man Noir and why modern technology is suddenly in his world. We had to wrap up the story with why the web is being wonky and so forth. There is so much there that it feels so cluttered. It feels like a mess, and it feels just as confusing and tangled up as the Web of Life and Destiny is, which again, I guess, which again kind of I think works for what you're trying to get with trying to showcase how confusing things are. But when you're a reader like me who's trying to follow the story and see where everything goes, it can be confusing having to keep track of all these things at once. I try my best to summarize I try my best to summarize as best as I could, but even I had to kind of think about, okay, what did I not talk about? What about the plot lines here? So I had to kind of group things together for the storyline. So I am going to consider that a problem with the book. It feels very cluttered, and kind of going back to the side effect of feeling like everything had to be rushed, how the finale felt like it had to be rushed. One major problem, sadly, is the Spider Goblin. Because we don't really learn much about him. Because honestly, on concept alone, he sounds awesome. He's not like a version of Harry Osborn, who not only became that his world Spider-Man, but also the Green Goblin, becoming like a mishmash of the two identities, and ultimately be going crazy. I think that's cool. I think that would legitimately be awesome, and I think it would have been cool to have that explored in its own storyline. And maybe the Web Warriors do learn about what happened with Spider-Man Noir's universe, and thus they go to investigate. They meet Harry, and then they meet Harry, and he talks about how he was pulled into his universe. And then at first they trust him, only for them to learn later that he's nuts and wants to gain access to the web, and thus the Web Warriors have to take him down. I think that would have been cool and would have fit into the aesthetic the Web Warriors were trying to establish. Have big threats that still kind of fit in the world of Spider-Man. It's why I liked Electroverse. That felt like a big multiversal threat, but again, like I said when I talked about the Electroverse storyline, it felt like a bigger version of Spider-Man versus Electro. And so likewise, we could have had a similar thing here as dealing with the whole multiverse thing. We dealt with a universe where the Green Goblin of another world was also that world Spider-Man, and using that Spider-Man connection, he gets in good with the team, only to reveal that he's just as knucking futz as any other Green Goblin in the multiverse, and thus the Spideys have to take him down. But ultimately, it's a hard battle because he got to know them well. He was able to infiltrate the defenses. He's got his own abilities that they have to counter, and ultimately combine that with his natural genius. It become a viable threat. That is cool. That would have been awesome. Sorry, cereal. But because of how rushed everything is, there's not really a lot of time to let the Spider Goblin stew. So as a result, it's a good idea that sadly I don't think was executed very well. And again, another consequence of feeling like everything was rushed is again the symbiote goo that Spider-Man Noir had. Like I said when I talked about Web Warriors number 6, that never comes back. That's never mentioned again. Even in future storylines featuring Spider-Man Noir. Sorry, they never mention that he has that bit of symbiote goo. It's just something he has and then is forgotten about. For all I know, he could have just chucked it away. For all I know, he could have just chucked it away. Maybe he put it on a shelf and forgot about it. I don't know. It's never talked about again, and it's annoying. It feels like that was supposed to be a small thing to build up to that was supposed to be something that was supposed to be like a hint of what was to come later on, but nothing ever comes of it. So I am going to call that a problem. Another problem I have, believe it or not, is also the artwork. Now, I mentioned how I wasn't going to talk about the artwork until, when I got to the final issue of the series, but this issue is where I have to special mention it. You want an example of the artwork? This is an example of the artwork. Stylized, very expressional, but mostly grounded and serious. You want to know how the artwork looks in the middle of the story? Cartoony and weird, just kind of strange and odd. And before you say, well, maybe that's just the universe they're in, because this universe is a weird universe, as it says that everyone here is made of gingerbread. But no, it stays that way it stays that way for about a few pages in the story. Look, this is what Spider-Man India and Spider-Man Noir looked like when they were talking to Harry Osborn. It still looks cartoony and weird and just kind of off base, and then in the next page it goes right back to the serious stuff. Now, admittedly, maybe this was like a technical thing, and that's what's going on behind the scenes I didn't realize. Maybe the creative team was hitting a deadline, and sadly the irregular artist couldn't keep up, so they had to substitute with someone else. And again, the cartoony stuff does work for some universes that we saw in that section, like the Gingerbread universe. It's just that when you go back to the more serious stuff, like having Mayday and Billy fight for their lives against the Electros, or having Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Man India talk it out talking with Harry, it feels like it shouldn't be this cartoonish. So I am still going to call it a problem with the book, or at least the issue, but I will say that there might be some stuff that went on behind the scenes that I don't know about that constituted the use of this. So don't like it, but willing to give it a pass if there was something going on behind the scenes that I wasn't aware of. So there you go. As such, for the rest of the story, but as a result, what do I think of the book? It's all right-ish. Again, the flaws I mentioned are what hold it back by a lot, but the Spider Army, but the Web Warriors are still not acting bad. There's still some good stuff. I liked the beginning when Octavia and the Spider Army and Couch wound up popping in on that movie set, and I invited the actors to join, which I thought was amusing. I legitimately liked seeing the Spider Army and the Electroverse Army rushing at each other to duke it out. That is awesome, no matter what. And it is cool, and I do still like seeing the Spideys still trying to think of ways to fix the problems on their own ends, like with the team of Spideys trapped on Spider-Punk's world, and how they are utilizing the resources they have at their disposal to ultimately find a way off that universe and go help Billy and Mayday. That I think is cool, and it does still end with some big what the hell moments as the Battery takes control of Megamorph Spider-Man's robot, and then likewise the stuff with Spider-Goblin, showcasing that things are definitely heating up. The problem again, though, is it still feels all cluttered and confusing and just all crammed in. Like everything was supposed to happen all at once, and they gotta wrap up these storylines as quickly as possible because the book's ending in an issue. So it's definitely there are still things there that hold it back. There are things in there that could have been fleshed out better, things that should have had more time to stew, but because they all had to be crammed together at once, it definitely feels like the book is being held back. It's not awful. There are still things in there I like, but it really feels like it could have been better. And if it had more time to stew, it probably could have been, but for what we got here, it really could have been a lot better. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I do still hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I didn't turn any of you off from this, but, well, as I just said, we're almost done. There is still, because next time we meet, ladies and gentlemen, we're not only going to be coming to the end of the Tangled States storyline, but the end of Web Warriors, and the end of the Spider-Verse era of these vlogs. So I hope you'll tune in on Thursday as we bid farewell to Spider-Verse and its trappings. Though there is still more of the multiverse to explore, so the vlogs aren't exactly going to be done. So I hope that I'll see you on Thursday. I hope you all have a good 4th of July, and as always, take care.